United States Navy, and on National Pet Day, which is today, we're going to talk about the animals in the United States Navy, what I like to call the golden age of pets and mascots in the Navy between 1880 and 1920, and how they figured into the history of the Navy. We tend to think of animals, animals rightly so, as fun, cute little furry things, but there actually is a real hidden purpose behind these animals. And there were two forces at work during this time period that really embraced these creatures. We'll start with the story about 1918. At Naval Trading Station Pelham Bay, which is in New York City, there were thousands of sailors being trained for World War I, and in a few weeks they're about to head off to combat. And there's this one little goat named Eli, who was the class clown. He ran around the place, made everybody laugh, and kind of forget about the fact that they were about to go into combat. And this is a photograph the Library of Congress has on their website of Eli and the recruit company's band, just having a grand time with Eli. They see he built him a hotel called Hotel Eli. Unfortunately, Eli, being a goat, decided to take on a wall, and the wall won, and they held a funeral for him. The commandant of the training station made everyone come to this funeral at attention, and they had last rites for Eli. This to show how, they say over 2,000, say soldiers in the article, he meant the newspaper reporter obviously means sailors, that attended this funeral for this one goat, and it was a beloved mascot. There was actually some very hard feelings about losing him. We've had mascots for animals for a long time, before 1880. We have records of sailing ships having cats on board for rat control purposes, having chickens on board. We see with USS Lehigh here with their rooster photobombing a picture. This is the monitor was on the James River in 1865, and the company of their lighting teams trying to get a formal portrait in, and the rooster just decides to walk in the middle of the shot. Your eyes are immediately drawn to it and away from, by the way, the turret in the background where you see 7 holes. 7 dents in the turret. This is from the combat the USS Lehigh went through during the siege of Charleston, and that's damage from Confederate forts. But most of us will miss that part for, oh, there's a cute rooster in the picture. So there have been animals on board ship before 1880. It's not until the age of photography, and photography really becomes prevalent in the 1860s and then on up, where sailors purposely put animals in the pictures with them. They think of these animals as much as part of the ship's company as anybody else. And so by 1880, we get a vast number of animals. We go from, I'm sure with one ship in the Civil War, we have maybe 1 or 2 documented mascots. They really don't mention them. It's actually quite hard to find in the written record. But by the 1880s and the turn of the 20th century, they're all over the place. Every band has one. Here's a Jack Russell mascot from the Kearsarge's band, 1902. They took them with them into combat. This is the U.S. Navy Railway Battery in France with their Jack Russell Terrier that they rescued from the front lines of France. They named him Cognac. This is probably the most overboard of them all. This is the battleship USS Connecticut, which reportedly had 26 mascots. This is not all of them in this picture. This is, I believe, about 15 of them. How they were able to get all these animals into one picture without everyone trying to go after each other is beyond me. Now you can kind of see the cat in the middle looking at the monkey like they're ready to go 10 rounds, but everyone is getting along with everybody. And all right, so that's, we think that animals is cute and cuddly, all that's sweet, we're all smiling at it, but there's a more serious purpose behind these animals. In this time period, this is what the historians like to call the Age of Steel. The ships are gleaming, purposely painted white. The United States is very proud of this fleet they built. This is the Great White, what we call the Great White Fleet in 1907, 1908, 1909, and it looks very magnificent. Down below, though, is a different story. These ships are a product of the same industrial age that gave us steel mills and other major amounts of urbanization and industrialization. The sailors are, in particular, working in the engineering section, are enduring some very harsh conditions. They are required to shovel hundreds of pounds of coal, maintain engines, which are not exactly always very kind to them, and it is a very rough life. Many newspaper reporters picked up on this, that they noticed that sailors needed some type of mental relief, if nothing else. One reporter said a Navy seaman's lot, and this is 1901, is largely one of hard work and much monotony. He's separated for months, sometimes for years, from the cheerful influences of home life. And while his ship is at sea, he rarely or never gets any real good sleep. Owing to the system of dividing the crew into watches, the sailors are only allowed 4 hours of continuous slumber before he's aroused for 4 hours of duties. At the end of that period, he's permitted to take another nap of 4 hours before the break between weeks, as tired as nerves. So as a result, sailors ought to come up with some way of keeping their brain focused on their job. And one way was with animals. Los Angeles Times reporter noticed that the same desire that leads a prisoner to make a pet of a spider on his dungeon wall or share his scanty fare with some mouse creates in a sailor's bosom a longing for something to long and cherish. The lonely seafarer bestows freely on dogs and cats, parrots and monkeys, guinea pigs, canaries, but chiefly on the goat. And so how were they allowed to have these animals? The rule back then, as far as I can tell, is the same today, is the captain's discretion. In 1901, the policy was a liberal policy pursued in this manner, but manifestly there is a limit to the number of those that can be accommodated. The surplus is sent on shore without delay. When the returned pier jumpers are lined up with the ship's riders called to roll to discover the laggards, it is one of those perplexing duties of the officer of the deck to decide which creature may or may not be added to the vessel's menagerie. That is this picture here by T.R. Walker in 1901. This is half of it, of the picture. You can see the ship's company is lined up, and they've got their animals in tow, and out of the picture is the officer of the deck of the Kearsarge, trying to decide which animals are going to stay, which ones are going. You see one of the junior officers in the background, or maybe probably one of the ship's clerk, officially recording in the book which animals are going to stay and which ones are not. But look at the expressions of the sailors. They all got smiles on their faces. This is happy times. We got an animal. This particular picture was drawn when the USS Curator visited Trinidad in 1901. And so, on the other side, the people who are really supporting the Navy this time period are people we generally call navalists. The Navy wanted to build a big Navy coming in the 1880s, 1890s, and the early 20th century, but they really needed the public's backing to do it. And so you get these organizations that we have today, like the Navy League of the United States, citizens organization that try to draw up support for the Navy from a grassroots standpoint. The Navy's participating in World's Fairs across the United States, the biggest one being the Columbian Exposition in Chicago in 1893, where they built a mock-up battleship, life-size battleship of the USS Illinois. And this is all, once again, to show, look at this grand Navy we have, all these magnificent machines that we want you to help support and man. And the biggest supporter was Teddy Roosevelt. Bar none, he's the man that we think of. This quote here, Navy, surest guarantee your peace, is one of the most famous quotes about why we need a Navy. You can sum it up in that one sentence. This was part of the State of the Union address in 1909. Well, on the other side of it, you do have people opposed to it. You do have pacifists. There's a very strong pacifist movement or anti-militarist movement in the United States. George Engel was a prominent lawyer, a member of Boston Society, leading member of Boston Society. He read Teddy Roosevelt's speech in 1909 and was quite appalled by it. He said, well, every well-informed man is aware that this harangue of the Navy is largely fictitious. I believe it was a waste of money, you're just warmongering. And so you have these two completely opposite sides of the coin in the political spectrum about should you support her job. He is the president of this new organization called the Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, the SPCA, which is still very much around today. It's built off the British model of getting people involved in animal welfare. Notice I said animal welfare, not animal rights. They are two completely different things. Their purpose at this point was to make sure that animals are just treated fairly, getting laws passed to prevent animal cruelty. And the Navy, ironically, you would think the two groups, the navalists and the animal welfare people, would have nothing to do with each other. They actually work together very closely. Because the navalists needed public support, they couldn't just go around spouting national security memos to people saying, well, because of the Germans and the British and possibly the Japanese is why we need a Navy. A large section of the population will read that, a large section of the population will not. So we need to have a different approach. And in public affairs, we call this soft news. Articles that will be read by people, they'll skip over those national security studies, but they will read ones about sailors' mascots. Lieutenant Ellicott is one of the pioneers of Navy public relations and Navy public affairs. He's the one that comes up with this idea of start publishing articles in family journals, children's magazines. The Navy's not so bad. Look, the Navy has a soft side. They got people like Mrs. Charles Sigsbee. This is the wife of the Captain Charles Sigsbee, the commanding officer of the USS Maine when the battleship exploded. She was a minor celebrity in her own right because of who her husband was, and she wrote articles in these family journals, these Christian magazines and other children's magazines about pets in the Navy. And so all of a sudden the public goes, oh, okay, so they start reading about what it is like in the Navy. One thing they have found out, what historians have found out, historians who study newspapers and journalism, have found out if you put a dog or a cat or any other type of other animal in a story, especially if it's like a big newspaper like the New York Times, it is 20 times more likely to be picked up by another newspaper and get more read than if you don't put an animal in the story. And so this becomes, and we could see this truth in the early 20th century. These are the teddy bear mascots, 16 bear cubs given as a gift from Aberdeen, Washington to the Great White Fleet. Each battleship got its own bear cub. And they all, most of them made it home. And so this was published in most newspapers and weekly journals of the day. Photographs of mascots start appearing in postcards and other types of more popular journals. We saw the Walker one from Leslie's Weekly. Photographers start taking pictures, very candid pictures of sailors with their beloved animals. You see the top there, the USS Louisiana with their Bull Terrier mascot. This is when they're actually in a combat situation off the coast of Veracruz, Mexico. The USS Olympia with their pig mascot, Sagasta, that they picked up in the Philippines right after the Spanish-American War. And then there's Tom. Tom was one of 3 cats that was on the USS Maine when the battleship exploded. And this cat, and then Tom in the lower left-hand corner, and the cat in the other side was one of the 3 that did not, one of the other 2 cats that did not survive. That was a cat that looks like a Maine Coon cat, very long, big, long-haired cat. I'm not sure if it actually is a Maine Coon, but certainly looked like one. And that particular cat dies. Well, these cats both become national either celebrities or martyrs in the case for animal welfare. The animal welfare people immediately pick up on this because the USS Maine is such a gut-wrenching story. Until Pearl Harbor, the explosion of the USS Maine was the biggest tragedy ever to hit the United States Navy, and most Americans knew about it. So you now hook the story of Tom, and he gets pictures drawn of him. Newspaper reporters reportedly went up to Tom to try to, quote, get an interview with them. They had cans of sardines to try to get Tom to talk to him. Someone actually caught a photograph of him after he was rescued by one of Maine's officers. And the animal welfare people know they need publicity too. They need any kind of good nonprofit or social economy organization, as they were called back then, needs fundraising materials. They need publicity. They need something that will get them on the public on their side. And the publication called Our Dumb Animals is not meant to be a derogatory term. This was the SPCA, the Massachusetts chapter of the SPCA, which was the largest chapter of the SPCA at the time. Their publication, Our Dumb Animals, is titled that way because they believe animals could not speak for themselves, and so we as humans must dumb in the actual literal sense of the word, someone who cannot speak. And so we humans, we at the Massachusetts chapter of the SPCA are going to speak for them. And there were articles in these publications about mascots, about how well the Navy is treating their animals. They wish that every organization would treat their animals as well as sailors do. And yeah, sailors will do some goofy things with their animals. And this was all in the aggressive spirit. Yes, they would stick pipes and cigars in their mouths. The one on the far left, Jack, was a battleship in World War, was the mascot of one of the battleships, and then that's one of the 16 bear cubs from Aberdeen, Washington. And the far right there, I believe, is an old English sheepdog aboard USS Olympia. USS Olympia is like the USS Connecticut. There are probably at least 10 mascots identified aboard the ship. After coming into World War II, mascots get less exotic. There are more dogs and cats, animals that we're familiar with, less birds, and no more bears, and no more, there was one case of a jaguar. So we get a lot more dogs and cats. So they're still there. They're still there in World War II, but just not as much as you're going to see in the Golden Age. This is what the picture we use to advertise this talk. This is a very, very, very cute picture of Scuttlebutt, mascot of a U.S. Navy minesweeper, being registered with his ID. Some ships went to the trouble of putting an ID out for him. Some, like the USS North Carolina, went to the trouble of drawing up a whole personnel sheet with a health record for their ship's cat. And this is the most famous, well, there are two very, before as we finish up here, there are two mascots that are really worth talking about from this time period. First is Bob. He is a Chow Chow, one of the first Chow Chows probably imported into the United States. And he was the personal pet of Admiral George Dewey. The story behind him is that when Olympia was in Hong Kong before the Spanish-American War started, Dewey's wardroom was like, well, the Admiral needs a mascot of some type. He needs an animal. And they found Bob running along the beaches of Hong Kong, and they grabbed him. And they said, this is perfect. And so they brought him back to the Admiral, and the Admiral was like, loved it, and said, I'm gonna name him Bob. We don't know exactly why, but he did. And there's several pictures of Bob. Chow Chows are known for being originally bred to guard Chinese royalty, and so they're to this day, the breed is known for just guarding being attached with one person. And so in this case, Bob immediately attached on to Admiral Dewey, and there's several pictures of just the two of them. Bob is off leash and always close at hand if the Admiral needs them. But there's another side to what Bob does to Dewey. These are the formal portraits, and Dewey was the national hero of the Spanish-American War. Everybody all the flag officers were in it, everybody knew Dewey. Now, this man's presidential material. And he always had these very serious-looking pictures, and these him posing for his formal pictures. But then there are these. Here's Bob and Dewey together. The titan of a man is now all of a sudden a human being. He smiles. He is in some ways, he is like the rest of us. He does come. This picture on the far right here is one of my favorite animals in the Navy photographs. There is Bob. Wanting attention, even though Admiral Dewey's about to sit for yet another formal portrait. He's in his dress blues, and Bob runs over and says, hey, Dad, I want a pet. No, all dog lovers can really relate to that particular picture. And it continues on with even some of the other titans of U.S. naval history. Here's Admiral Nimitz, here's Admiral Fletcher, Admiral Bellinger, all three major figures in the U.S. Navy's campaign in the Pacific. If you're not familiar with Bellinger, Bellinger is the one who wrote the very famous message, the Air Raid Pearl Harbor, this not drill. That was Bellinger who wrote that. As junior officers, with Puy, his personal pet that he took with him in World War I campaigns, and then Bellinger with a Kinkajou off the coast of Panama. And they are all smiling, a little bit more relaxed, a little bit more human. And then it's a human side of these great giants of the Navy. And we'll finish up with the most famous mascot of them all, the lasting legacy of this time period. In 1893, Armored Cruiser New York pulls into Annapolis with a little goat, who's pictured here, named El Cid. And the midshipmen of the Naval Academy get the idea of, hey, we need one of these things. And so they eventually get one, they call him Bill, and today they have 4 of them, kept under guard, I understand, of some type, at a farm away from the cadets of West Point. That's all I have. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in our social media services or email us here at the museum. Thank you very much.